Good morning, everybody. This is the Personal Playlist Podcast, fondly referred to as the P3 on Voice Ed Radio. I'm Noah Daniel.
Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand, with an equal opportunity for all to sing, dance, and clap.
We're here this morning on my second Personal Playlist Podcast. I'm so excited that Chris Cluff is here. I call him the guy. When we first met, I was so excited to hear his stories, and I was like, oh yeah, you're the guy. And we were in this funny experience during Mad PD where it came up just as I was coming into the conversation. So let's welcome Chris Cluff. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks, Noah. This is awesome.
Do you remember when that happened?
I don't know if it was I have a different in moment thing. It was the when we met at the pub PD, and it was sort of like, hey, you're that person. And it was kind of like, hey, you're that person. And then there was sort of an immediate, is this a safe space for us to be in real life people? And I can remember having a moment where of really clear assurance from you where you're sort of like, yeah, you go for it. Be whatever version you want. And I felt like you just kind of extended that sense of we're good to go. Like it was that weird moment of digital introductions. That handshake was the exact same in real life. So I'm kind of floating on that one. Bring me back to the Mad PD thing. I probably did.
So that's exactly what I was talking about
Okay.
when we first met at the pub PD, and then you were on Derek's YouTube Live during Mad PD, and I came in and I guess you were speaking about something related to that because it was one of these incredible clandestine things. I was just going to come on in and quietly be there, and all of a sudden you're like, I was just talking about you, and I thought of all the people in all the land. That's pretty funny.
That's in it's, and I do. I remember. I remember that moment. You just kind of popped up in the Google Hangout, but it's funny. I don't remember. On one hand, not surprised. These things happen. Love it when they happen. And it's great to sort of notice them and tease them apart just a little bit. I just love that those moments exist. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about though in the Mad PD. Did we even update you, or was it just like, hey?
No, I think he was speaking about innovation, so I wanted to get there, and okay. I had come in a little bit into the conversation, so I wanted to just quietly appear. Anyway, it was amazing, and always talking to you and listening to your podcast is amazing. And I actually want to read out the description of Chasing Squirrels because I think it says so much. So it says, changes in education can happen frequently and often suddenly. One day I feel like I got both hands on the wheel and others not so much. This podcast explores the challenges of adding meaning, creativity, and connectivity to our own ed universes with the tools and rules educators use to thrive alongside their students. And the thing that gets me really is the thrive alongside their students. And I think that in a lot of ways that's the reason for this podcast is music helps us thrive, and it's something we need to feed ourselves and ensure that, just like with the oxygen mask, we're always making sure that we're infusing ourselves with happy vibes and great learning in order to ensure that we're there for our students to do the same. So what is it that you do, Chris Cluff, besides this incredible podcast?
So in work, I support students that have been expelled and suspended from their home schools, and this is at the secondary level. It's a new portfolio for me. It's considered a centrally allocated position, so somewhat like a consultancy. So I'm in this position for the next 3 years. There's the possibility of adding a fourth year, depending on projects or board needs. And then I have to find another position, or I go back into the pool and I get placed at a school. Before that, I was a subject head for personalized alternative education. So I've kind of enjoyed a career so far in education that has let me kind of choose whether or not what side of the window I want to be on. And it's
That's a really interesting descriptor, actually.
Yeah, it's I've often said things like fringes. I've said, being kind of frontier, hunter gatherer, all these kind of things that despite the small spaces I've inhabited, I've always felt I've had a lot of freedom to get the work done in a way that was really highly responsive to the student needs. Yeah.
That's really amazing. And I think, when we talk about personalizing, you can't talk about it without the idea of responsiveness, because you might have a plan to meet the needs of students and then something happens and you have to be ready to respond to it. So it sounds like you get to do that in your role.
Yeah, I do. And I find a large part of it, I'll throw right now my current, actually I'll do this in a different way. Prior to this year, this past school year, being in personalized alternative education, there's components, there was a whole lot of freedom, a lot of really cool stuff I was able to do there. One of the pieces that I always felt was missing was the support of someone that was deeply schooled in sort of therapeutic approaches and counseling approaches. Now, I've done the PD on that, but I have to say I start from sort of like, I'm trained as a teacher with these additional qualifications. So my center is, kind of as a learning strategist.
That's so interesting. What an interesting vantage point.
And I get to now work with a CYW. I think the new acronym is CYC. I don't know what they changed the last thing to, but I'll throw a shout out. Her name's Pam Belding, and she does a really great job. I try and neutralize our space and language by we're both educators in the space. We get to come to that center, me from, let's say, the teaching strategies, learning strategies, and she from the therapy and the counseling side. And I've found that it's really built we talk about responsiveness, but even a higher responsiveness, because now it's not just about how can I get that kid to get to the math or the science or the art faster. It's how do we make sure that the wellness comes first, and then we can sort of work towards or back towards or work around or to the curriculum second. So, yes.
Well, that's a holistic approach to learning, and I think it's a really important model all around.
Which I hadn't known prior to this year. I knew of it. I suspected it was one of the sort of waves kind of forming out in the distance, but I never got immersed in it till this year. So I have a deeper appreciation for that type of co-creating with another educator in the room.
That's so cool. So the idea of the Personal Playlist podcast is that you pick and bring to the conversation a nostalgic song, a song that shows your identity, and one that picks you up or motivation. And when I told you that, what were you thinking? How did you go through the process of choosing your 3 songs?
Okay, so my process, say yes and then figure it out, was my first response.
Yay.
Second, this is going to be challenging because I'm not a memory keeper. I'm not it's my own my own inner conflict with being nostalgic and sort of finding the places and spaces to keep things that I guess promote nostalgia. I find I'm very impulsive, but I'm also I've been told I'm kind of intense to be around for any extended period of time. Now, if I modulate that slightly, what I feel like I'm doing on the inside is really trying to stay in the moment. Like I'm really trying to stay in that space with whoever else is in there, whether sort of, in the van with the family or in the classroom with the kids. And to sort of have that experience, it gets kind of boxed away because at the end of that experience, it's done. And I don't often feel compelled to go back and open up that experience. It's a strange kind of little balancing act. So when you asked me to do this, I'm the type, I've dabbled with kind of like, dream journals and keeping the Post-it notes by the side of my bed to kind of like those quick fleeting ideas in the middle of the night. And I've looked back at those things in the morning and like, what the blank was I thinking? Like it looks like crazy people talk, and I'm okay with
You're not
that.
supposed to judge it. You're just supposed to do it.
I know, and I'll try and embrace the design process that we're going to put the creation in a separate compartment from judgment and analysis. But when you're in the morning before you get coffee and you're looking at this scrub of paper, like you can't help but just go, what was I doing? So this challenge of finding the songs that sort of are like for me, and sorry, but like are there the labels on the boxes? Are there the stuff in the boxes? Is it the sort of like, where I put the box of the memory? Classic overthinking, but that's how I kind of came at this. So I had to really, it's almost like I had to dive in, sit at the bottom of the pool for a while and see what out of desperation. You mentioned oxygen before. So what was the oxygen that I was grasping for when I just kind of was hitting that limit? Okay, I can't stay at the bottom of the pool anymore. And that's where these 3 songs kind of came from.
That's amazing, I think, too, because it wasn't easy. And when you're doing this task, and I know students who experience something similar, although would never articulate it like that, which is a new perspective I am excited to consider further. Is they go through this critical thinking experience, but because it's personal, there's a deeper reflection and there's a process and a cycle that you go through in making your selection that becomes something else. So I'm glad that you had an otherworldly kind of experience choosing them, and I'm excited to play them out. So your first song that's nostalgia, it made me think about when K-Tel used to sell albums. I had his album, and even though he died too young, you would see like these collections. So why is this Jim Croce song your nostalgic song?
So, I have, and again, going to that shelf and looking at, the surprise of having stuff actually stored there. I sort of, because to be honest, like sometimes with memory, I get rid of it's right into the shredder. I'm like, oh, I'm okay with this. I have this experience. I have the shape of the experience. Do I really need the details? I don't think so. So with this song in particular, there's a whole lot kind of balled up with it. I'll go just kind of like memories that kind of tumbled out of this box. Me driving with my dad in a Chevy Nova, listening to the radio. There's a memory of a conversation with my parents about a concert that they went to. There's also, my dad worked for the Bank of Nova Scotia for 41 years. And on weekends, he was a wedding DJ, which is this crazy dissonant kind of, how do those two ideas work together?
Yeah, it's a perfect juxtaposition, actually.
But you're right, and they do. So I would go with him for his afternoon sound check, carrying in his 45 RPM long boxes of singles, A side and B side. And I would sit
spider clips to go with them. Oh, how I love that vision.
Exactly. Yeah. Help him set up his equipment and sit at some long banquet table, just kind of mindlessly picking apart the edge of it because it's like a banquet table. So you're pulling and listening to him do sound check and Jim Croce. I was torn between 2 songs by Jim. I went with this one. The one that I was going to go with was Bad Leroy Brown, because my dad would sound check using 2 different sort of like styles. So he liked using something a little bit harder and then one that was a little bit softer. So that's how I came to this one. And I think lyrically, it reminds me a lot of my father's path of being a banker, being a banker manager, but also having art on the side and watching him manage those 2 parts of himself and being creative in both spaces and being sort of constructive in both places. So, yeah.
Okay, so here's Jim Croce, I Got a Name.
Like the pine trees lining the winding road, I've got a name. I've got a name. like the singing bird and the croaking toad. I've got a name, I've got a name, and I carry it with me like my daddy did. But I'm living the dream that he kept here. Moving me down the highway, rolling me down the highway, moving ahead so life won't pass me by. Like a north wind whistling down the sky, I've got a song, I've got a song.
I remember that song, and I totally see at least the car part of it. I think it's so interesting that your story that goes with it is so multidimensional, and that's, reflective of how powerful songs can be. So when your dad stopped DJing on the weekends, what did he do with his music collection?
He was he worked for a guy, so he was a good friend. A good friend of his had the serious day job, and this was the sidecar to his day job, his hustle on the side. And my dad worked for cash for him. He would just get the assignment, and he said, "Okay, you're going to the Ukrainian Presbyterian, banquet hall in Whitby," and he would go over to his buddy's name was John, so we'd drive over to John's house and pick up the two long boxes, like these boxes, easily 3 feet long, just full of 45. Just a funny metric there, eh? Just to pause, there's a funny metric there though, because I wish I could go back and someone with deeper memory than me would probably be able to do that. Maybe I'll get it put out to, was it Matthew Aldrich or Donna Miller? Like, what's the actual, mathematically, how many 45 records are in a 3 foot long box?
I'm going to look it up, because when I blog about this, that's the picture that I want to put underneath.
And two of those. So I would have to help him. That's my mind. I'm helping him, but I'm 6 years old, there's no way. That's got to be at least 50 pounds of records. So I got choked listening to that. It's funny. I went back there, but I can't go back there without proper provocation. And I think that's what has happened with this activity, is that in short order, in the same way I can quickly say, I don't need that. I don't often say I don't need that anymore. I will say I don't need that right now. My process is, if I don't need that right now, do I really want to shelve it, or can I just get rid of it because I know I could find it again somewhere? And there's a perfect moment of finding it again somewhere in the right moment when I need to.
I love that you use the word provocation, because that's really when you're trying to be creative in the classroom, that's the goal, is you create a provocation that everybody has an entry point to, and hopefully has a way to channel the self, whether it's choice and voice, or it's through just this reflective process, or hopefully all of them together, because it's so powerful. You send people on a journey to bring a piece of themselves to the table. So thank you for bringing a piece of yourself and your dad to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for taking me there.
Well, we're going to keep going. And the idea of an identity song is really about what song tells your story. And I'm sure it can change. And I'm sure if there was a TV show and the theme song came on and it was about you, this song would help you. So I actually don't know a lot about Ben Howard. What is it about the song that's your identity song?
Well, the original version was released. When it was released, there was a whole, the original song is Bruce Springsteen's. So the version that I experienced my first contact with this song did nothing to make me like this song. But I was soaked with it because it was constantly being played. And it also, I think, so this would have been my preteen years when it came out. I've always been a lyricist. The words, for me, had to make sense. They had to make sense. I had to be able to make meaning from the words. And I didn't stop at if I read something or I consumed something or I experienced something, I didn't put the onus necessarily on the artist to bring that meaning to me. I was always cognizant of the fact that if I didn't understand it, then I got work to do. So in some ways, this song in particular became, and again, it was the overplay, and there was something around the culture of Springsteen that I just couldn't buy into. I couldn't buy into the sort of the hype machine that was around him. And I'm not disputing his talent. I'm not disputing his.
I saw him live.
And you know what? And I think for me, to be honest, had I had the invitation or opportunity to see him perform, I know that would have changed everything for me.
I really think it would. Actually, a friend of mine from work made me a copy of the album, The River, before I went to see the show. Mm-hmm. And I listened. And I knew Springsteen from a lifetime, but I really grew a whole other layer of respect for how he performs and what he brings to the stage. I saw Dylan last night, and that's the complete opposite. Bob Dylan brought very little to the stage. It could have been a lounge. Could barely understand what he was saying, but I do it out of nostalgia. Right. But seeing Springsteen was worth the money. Anyway, but you chose the Ben Howard version because of that.
Well, this like the suddenness of me rediscovering the Croce song. It was maybe 5-6 years ago. I'm just, you're sort of surfing through YouTube, and someone said, you find yourself running out the gate and finding yourself just in this space with, there's a whole lot of links and stuff. And one of the links, it had that dancing in the dark again. And I immediately went back to, yeah, but that's Springsteen and all that. But then I looked at the bottom and I was like, Ben Howard. I'm like, okay. And it was funny because I didn't play it right away. I needed to know who Ben Howard was first. So I sort of, you open up the duplicate window, you sort of start to look at Ben Howard. I'm like, you know what? Like, this guy, his thing, like, this just speaks to me. And I've come to accept that I have a parallel. I should be playing the guitar and singing, no matter what the value is. I've come to accept that there's a hidden part of me that I've never fully fleshed out that's musician based, whether it's by confidence or opportunity. I've never ever gone there. Yet I carry a lot of music with me. I not tap like tap dancing, but like I guess I could tap dance too, but I'm sort of like, I'll be tapping and sort of making beats on things. It's kind of like my default position while I'm experiencing kind of creative boredom. So I'll tap.
You've got the music in you.
I think so. And I think I find that I'm really, really deeply connected with an individual that can play the guitar and sing. Okay. So retrofitting the Ben Howard version onto this made me re-examine a narrative about myself and sort of self, but through an experience. I was like, do I actually not like this? Like, was I just not finding the right door to sort of walk in?
Okay, I'm dying to hear this version of the song. So I want to hear more from you, but I want to play it. Song. Okay. Ben Howard, Dancing in the Dark.
Get up in the evening and I ain't got nothing to say. I come in the morning, I go to bed feeling the same way. I ain't nothing but tired, man, I'm just tired and bored with myself. Yeah, baby, I could use just a little help. Can't start a fire, can't start a fire without a spark. This gun's for hire, even if we're just dancing in the dark.
Wow, I'm channeling Tracy Chapman, actually. That is a very interesting version. But seeing what you said about being a guitar player, I really get why that spoke to you.
There's something too in the sparseness of it. So it's and it's interesting, a version that the version that I experienced first is actually the song done in duet. Actually, I'll make this entirely complex. So it's a version that's done in duet. So it's Ben Howard. So, but okay, and I have to jump on my idea before I lose it. That's the accidental kind of Velcro in this, is that the simplicity with which it was presented to me, the way that it was presented to me in the first place, with Springsteen and the music video, and let's say the American kind of cachet to it, and the industrial town and everything else that was kind of about it, it didn't speak to me. Mm-hmm. What spoke to me, the version, and I told you how it was presented back to me, but what hooked me on this is that this song was actually the music to a modern dance piece between two dancers. And you can find the link quite easily. I can send it to you afterwards. Okay. The dance piece is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And the song is Ben Howard singing with, I think it's Yael Naim. Okay. I think she might be an Israeli singer. Mm-hmm. And they do a duet and they break it up like a conversation. So the dance is a conversation. And when I saw it like that, I'm like, holy crap, that's the way that I needed to experience. I like this song now. And in doing so, I won't say that I won't say I went back and did back catalog of Springsteen after that. But but I will tell you, the funny, and this was what makes this so complex for me, is I don't often know what it is about the memory that makes it memorable. It isn't a singular, it's like not having the words to express why you're feeling something or how you see something, but you have the compulsion to sort of express it in some manner. So that song locked in as like kind of a weird 80s kind of a moment for me. It needed to be rediscovered 30 years later.
Well, it sounds like you rediscovered it. And I think that any conversation is a dance. So I think it's interesting that this dance is a conversation of this song. But I'm worried about time and we have lots to cover. So we have to get to your pick-me-up song.
Okay.
Your song that if you're feeling low, you pull it out. And I found this quote when you wrote me that you were doing a Billy Bragg song. I found this quote of his. It's my duty to make people go away feeling they're not alone. And I thought, wow, if that song has anything to do with that quote, that could certainly pick somebody up. So introduce why you chose that song.
This is I would say the simplest of the three. I craved a life that I had absolutely no tools to make for myself. So I experienced this song in high school. I had a buddy that was deep into the UK music scene, a lot of Madness, UB40, General Public, the ska kind of era. Billy Bragg kind of fell out of that. Again, not knowing it, guy on a guitar, kind of an approach. It was the lyrics in this. Well, I will tell you two things. One, it's the electric guitar lead that just, I will never ever get that out of my head. It's instantaneous. It's Pavlovian. I become a rebellious teenager. Secondly, in the lyrics, it spoke to things that I didn't understand, but it sounded adult. It sounded like I thought to myself, I'm listening to this song and like you said, that connected experience. This is somebody's life that I think I'm kind of living. It made me question kind of my own existence as a teenager. And yeah, and again, that leading edge guitar line, just, it's unstoppable for me.
Okay, well, we're going to hear it. So this is A New England by Billy Bragg.
I was 21 years when I wrote this song. I'm 22 now, but I won't be for long. People ask me, when will you grow up to be a man? But all the girls I love at school are already pushing prams. I loved you then as I love you still. Though I put you on a pedestal, they put you on the pill. I don't feel bad about letting you go. I just feel sad about letting you know. Looking for
Wow.
That's insane. It's like
Your descriptor was so perfect. And you know what it reminds me too, putting your songs together, about how activities like this, provocations like this, they're not about filling in the blanks with adjectives and facts about who you are, and they're not always perfect descriptors if
Mhm.
you had to fill out a bio that this is me. But it gives insight into a person in a way that you just can't get from any other source because music is that powerful. So, and whether you use it for your own personal journey or you use it in the classroom to create a community where everybody brings these elements of themselves with their explanations, with as best of an explanation as possible, because clearly some of them are unnameable. Some aspects are just bigger than words.
Yeah.
It can do so much. So I am thrilled that you went on this journey with me. I I don't want to have to edit this out. You'll have to help me because it's supposed to be 30 minutes, but this was just too good and I couldn't rush you. So, do you want to have any closing remarks before we leave this space?
You're leaving me happy. Thank you for letting me play.
Woohoo! Well, that's the goal. I'm going to close it out then.